I heard this from a Jew. He was a rabbi in Springfield, Massachusetts. His name was Rabbi David Edelman. He had a school. He passed away a number of years ago at the age of 90. For 50 years he ran a Jewish day school in Springfield, Massachusetts. And he told me the following personal experience he had, which taught me so much about communicating with the Jewish people today, especially with the Jewish youth, and especially an understanding of what Torah's chesed is, what feminine Torah is. And he said that he was a yeshiva boy learning in Brooklyn in the early 1940s. He was a teenager learning in yeshiva. He learned in the Chabad yeshiva called Tomchet Mimim on 770 Eastern Parkway in Brooklyn during the lifetime of the 6th Lubavitcher Rebbe who died in 1950, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, the father-in-law of the most recent Lubavitcher Rebbe. And he said he's standing at an elevator there in the yeshiva, that near the elevator, and he's schmoozing with another boy. And who walks out the door? A man who would later become the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, who at the time was the son-in-law of his father-in-law, who was at that time the Lubavitcher Rebbe known as the Rayatz, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak. And he sees two boys schmoozing, Rabbi Edelman and somebody else, Rabbi Fogelman. And he says to them in Yiddish, "Ihr wilt hören a frischen Wort von Rebbe?" You want to hear a fresh, as we would say, fresh out of the oven, a new Wort, a new insight. I just heard from my father-in-law from the Rebbe. They said, of course. And this is what the future Lubavitcher Rebbe of blessed memory would tell them in 1942 or 43. He said, a lot of Jews come into shul here, including secular Jews. I have a custom. My custom is I'm warm to everybody. I display warmth to everybody, and I'm a Kiruv people. I show them warmth, I greet them with a smile, and I always try to empower them and encourage them. And there were older Hasidim who came to me and they said, this is wrong behavior, because these are Jews who are not frum, and by displaying love to them, it could sound like you're giving a hechsher, you're giving a kosher certificate on their desecration of many mitzvahs. You should be more cold and rigid. And the future Lubavitcher Rebbe tells Rabbi Edelman, who tells me, I did not know if I was right or wrong. So I went up to my father-in-law, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, and I asked him the question. I said, I have a custom to embrace all Jews with love, and some of the older Hasidim told me it's the wrong thing to do. And he said, my father-in-law just now, the Rebbe looked at me and he said, every father and mother, when they have a baby, they love that baby with their entire heart and their entire soul. That's how God made it. If they're healthy, functional parents, they love the child with every fiber of their being. And you would think there's no more place for love in the heart. And yet when they have another child, somehow the heart expands and they have infinite love for the second child. And with the third child comes again infinite love. And the love just keeps on growing with every single child. And yet, he said, in Yiddish, sometimes a baby is born. And the baby is born with a challenge, or the baby develops a challenge, heaven forbid. An illness, an infection, baby is crippled, baby is disabled, there may be a blemish in a certain part of the body, and the child experiences a severe limitation. And he said, for this child, the parents possess, and I'll say it in Yiddish, an eigenartige Liebschaft, a unique, unparalleled love. Even though you would think, how could you love more? You already love all of your children infinitely. But this child who's suffering, this child who's struggling with something, for this child, they have a special, special place in their heart because of their sensitivity towards the difficulties of this child. They don't love him less. They don't love her less. They love this child much more. There's a special empathy that healthy, normal, loving parents have to such a child. And then he said these words. The Ribono Shalom Hashem loves every Jew like an only child. The love is infinite. The love is absolute. The love is unconditional. The love is unwavering. Nothing could sever, stifle, suppress, obliterate, or even diminish, dilute, mitigate, or compromise the love. The love is absolute and infinite to every single Jew. But sometimes God has a child who has a challenge. A child who's lacking something. And he said, a Jew doesn't put on tefillin. There's something missing in their arm. A Jew who doesn't learn Torah, there's something missing. There's such challenge in the mind and the mouth. A Jew who doesn't celebrate Shabbos, doesn't light Shabbos candles, there's something missing in the home. A Jew doesn't keep the mitzvah of, a couple doesn't keep the mitzvah of mikveh, there's another component that's missing. Hashem looks at these children who are missing something, who are devoid of a certain meaning, of a certain inspiration, of a certain depth, of a certain mitzvah. And these children, He professes a unique, unparalleled love to them precisely because of His sensitivity to what they're lacking. And He looked at him and He said, Du führst with der Eberster. You continue to behave like God. That's how I want you to behave. And I found it fascinating when he told me the story, Rabbi Edelman, because who would have suspected that from all people in the last generation, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Zechron Levracha, had doubts about Kiruv. Should I be Mekar? But he did. And yet once he heard from his Rebbe what's the proper method, he never turned back. And then I understood the difference of Torah's emes and Torah's chesed. Torah's chesed is the Torah that always sees the endless flow of love, of energy, of empowerment, of interconnectivity between all the people, between the world and Hashem, between heaven and earth, between the body and the soul, between the spiritual and the physical. That's what chesed is. Chesed is connectivity. The word ahava, love, is the same gematria. It's 13. Same gematria like echad, oneness. It's chesed, it's ahava that create oneness between people, between God and the people, between heaven and earth. This was the mistake of the spies. They understood Judaism as a separation between heaven and earth. If we go into Eretz Yisrael, we won't be able to sustain our Judaism. We have to stay in the desert. They didn't understand the Torah of Chesed, the Torah of interconnectedness, the Torah of cohesiveness, the Torah which is holistic, the Torah which encompasses all of reality in the entire world.